Hey traders, this is Chris Drysdale, founder of the Drysdale Trading Group. Excited to bring you our next video. This video is going to be a deep dive into the three main tools I use during the trading session. All right, it's going to be a combination of VWAP, it's going to be initial balance, and the volume profile. So what I'd like to do is kind of do a deep dive tutorial on each one of them, go over the settings, and make sure you guys have no question on how these set up and how I use them. Okay, so with that, I'm going to dive into the charts. Okay, so here we have a 5-minute chart on NQ, and I'm going to go through one tool at a time, and we're going to start with the VWAP. Okay, the tool on TradingView that I use is volume weighted average price. Okay, this is going to select the absolute default under technicals. All right, this is not a community indicator. Okay, when you do install it, it comes preloaded, ready to go. All right, it normally, if you're trading futures like I do, will anchor it to the beginning of the Globex session, which is 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, you'll see the one standard deviation band at the top, the one standard deviation band at the bottom, and the VWAP right in the middle. Okay, you can already see how powerful these levels are. This is, it is April 11th. It is almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see how much price has been respecting the upper band and lower band, and when eventually broke out, the back confirmation long on NQ. Okay, so very powerful. This video isn't going to be about the strategy itself. Those are other videos. Please check those. Those are on the channel homepage. So when we go into the settings of this indicator, all right, we're going to use the session unless we're using one of the higher time frames. So if we're looking at an hour, half hour, if you see my 4-quadrant layout that looks like this, in the bottom right, this is a higher time frame, and this is 30 minutes. Okay, on this I use a weekly and a monthly VWAP. All right, you can anchor those right up here to the week, to the month, and then even the bottom left, this is my daily chart. You can anchor this to the beginning of the year. Okay, so you did that right up here, but on my short-term 5-minute screen, I'm doing the session. I changed the source to OHLC 4. All right, this includes the opening price, it's more information, and it gives us better data. We're going to use the standard deviation, and we're just going to use one standard deviation and just one band. Okay, you could change how it looks up here, and that's it. All right, very basic, for the most part, default settings. You'll just make a quick little tweak in there, but otherwise, this is the VWAP. Okay. Even on the longer sessions, you can see how these levels are respected and often used, all right, to give confluence on the shorter time frame. Okay. Now this follows the general principles that I follow in the VWAP Wave system, right? When we're in value, right, this would be the VWAP value area. If we're trading in value and we're in a balanced session, we're going to fade the value area extremes. If we can't get through the point of control, which is the VWAP, we can expect to go to the previous side of value, which we did. If we can't break out of value again, fade value area extremes, retest the point of control or VWAP. If we can break through, we can expect to go to the other side of value. If this holds, we go back to VWAP, and it just goes on like this, guys. That's how value trading works. All right, those are the principles. If we can't get through point of control, we go back. If we can, we go to the other side. Very simple. All right, if we're able to break out of value, we generally trade in the direction of the new price discovery. Okay, so looking for that pullback for a long into price discovery or the short, all right, if we're breaking out to the downside. Okay, those are the basic principles for the VWAP. So let's remove that. All right, the next indicator I'm going to show you is going to be my personal initial balance indicator. So if you type in initial balance, all right, you're going to select this one right here by me, Trader Drysdale. All right, that's going to plug it right on the screen. Okay, it's showing you today's initial balance. Now there's something wonky with futures. It's because the CEME is located in Central time zone. So the initial balance is the first hour of trading for any market open. Okay, this is different than a opening range. All right, opening ranges are generally shorter periods of time, as short as 30 seconds to 5 minutes to 15 minutes. The initial balance is always the first hour of trading. Okay, by definition, the initial balance is the first hour. Also, a lot of people say, oh, it's like an orb, right? The opening range breakout. Well, orbs are always breakout trades, okay? If it's an opening range breakout, the setup is a breakout. With the initial balance, it's not always a breakout trade, okay? It could be a fade setup, okay? So there is difference between opening ranges and the initial balance. And I want to make that absolutely clear. So it's always an hour, and it's always the first hour of trading, okay? Now, we have to set that for each market. So now US stocks, the open of regular trading hours is 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, so with this particular futures, since there's a lapse in the time, you have to set it to 8:30 to 9:30 to actually get the correct time. Right, so that's actually the correct initial balance. All right. Just make sure for US stocks, it's 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. All right. And this trades pretty much like our VWAP wave. Okay. So the initial balance high and the initial balance low are like the upper band and lower band on the VWAP. All right. So this is our value area. All right. If we can't get past point of control, which is the IB midpoint, we can expect to go back to the other side of value. If we can, we'll expect to go to this value area. If we can break out, look to long the retest as we explore price discovery outside of this original value area. Okay. Once we move into a new value area, all right, this is an IB extension right here. This is essentially just another initial balance. So if I can take the exact direction or size of this initial balance, it's just the initial balance. Again, this is a measured move with another midpoint. Okay, this could be considered a new value area. All right, if we can't get past this point of control, we could expect to go back to IB low. If we can, go back to IB high. All right, so this creates another area for setups. All right, as the value area shifts. All right, a lot of institutions and hedge funds and professional traders have been using the initial balance for decades. These are highly probable areas and inflection points. All right, so we need to watch them. It goes so far to a triple IB extension. All right, this would be an extreme day, and on a really extreme day, we'll trade above this. But for the most part, in normal market conditions, we'll trade somewhere within this entire area. Okay. Now with different markets like gold, for example, or oil, right, they have different initial balance times. Okay. So for example, oil, CL, the open of oil is 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. So this has its own initial balance. And you can see how this area is respected. Once we break out, we back test. All right. And how important those, we get a reaction at each of these levels. Okay. Very important. With gold, all right, the initial balance is 8:20 a.m. to 9:20 a.m. Right, so you have to change it for gold. Right, so I'll make this 8:20 to 9:20. Right, so that will give me the proper initial balance on gold. Okay. Now I do have these all put together, all the times you need for this. All right, I have this as a PDF in my free Discord. If you're not in my Discord, check the description below. There's a free invite, and you can find this document in there. Okay, so here's all the different initial balance times. you can see that silver and copper and gold all have different start times. This is based on the pit in the United States. This is when it actually opens. We have platinum at 8:20, crude oil 9 a.m., the dollar's at 8 a.m., the euro's at 8:20, the British pound 8:20, Australian dollar 8 a.m., treasury bonds 8:20, wheat, soybeans, corn 9:30, cotton 10:30. So it just goes on like this. They all have different initial balance times. So you just want to make sure that's reflected in the indicator. Okay, so you can adjust that here. I like to not only display the current IB levels, but I like to see yesterday's as well. All right, these yesterday's levels will also be important. All right, so I like to be able to see yesterday's levels as well. As far as the other settings, you really don't have to play as much with this. We have this analytics right here at the bottom. You can see if today's initial balance is average, medium, small, or large based on the last 20 trading days. So that's helpful. How big is our range today that we're trading? How much volatility? Should I be sizing appropriately for the range? Okay, so that's a great little indicator in there. You can change the colors. You can change the labels, pretty much how it looks. And, that for the most part, you can get rid of some of the lines. But I recommend having, for the most part, the default settings for this. Okay. So the takeaways, all right, we traded just like the VWAP bands. All the same principles apply. All the different markets have different times, all right? So if you're trading currencies or commodities or energy or agriculture, US stocks, they all have a different initial balance time. And to grab that in my Discord, all right? If you have questions on that, drop it in the free chat in the Discord or in the comments below, okay? So lastly, the last indicator we use is going to be the volume profile. Okay, now if you see my 4-screen layout, you can also grab this layout in my Discord as well. The top left here, I have an hourly chart. Okay, and on this hourly chart, I have the entire session volume profile. And then on the smaller time frame, I'll use it on the open of the market. So 9:30 a.m. for the indexes, and then pretty much all the same initial balances. All right. And again, this has all the same principles. All right, let's talk a little bit about volume profile. All right, we create what are called distributions. All right, these are high volume areas. All right, this is where our institutions, this is where our hedge funds, this is where our big players are trading. They're getting in and out, and this creates our value area, all right, where the most trading is taking place. All right, this is where the same principles apply. All right, there's the point of control. This is the price level where the most business has been transacted. And then about 70% of this distribution is our value area. Okay, so let's drop that again. All right, I'm using the drawing tool. This is an anchored volume profile, and I can drop it anywhere on my chart I want it to start, and it will continuously give me data. There's a ranged version if I just want to see what it's doing in a specific previous range of time on the distribution. And then there's, in the indicator section, there's the SVP, which is the session volume profile. Okay, and I can program this to start. Generally, I go to custom. I don't use these pre-builts because they tend to malfunction on futures. So I'll use the custom, and I want it to start at 9:30 a.m., but we have that issue with the CMA, so we got to make it 8:30 to start at 9:30, okay? Now I can see my distributions. All right, and some will often build more than one distribution. So whenever I see a distribution form, all right, I want to fade the value area extremes back to point of control, or if we break out, I want to look long, all right, because if we're in price discovery. Same thing to this side, all right, fade the value area extremes back to point of control. If we get at point of control, go to the other side of value. If we break out, we can expect a short. All right, for price discovery, all right, moving to a different distribution. These smaller distributions can actually be traded as well with their own value area high and value area lows. So these now become value areas to trade. Okay, all the same principles apply. Let's remove the drawings. Some of the things I like to do here, the default is going to be up, down. We want to keep value area volume at 70. I'll normally change this rows layout much higher. Okay, we don't want up, down. We don't need to know buyers versus sellers. It's just too much information. So we do total volume. Value area 70%, so 70% of all the trading is our value area. Our row size, raise it to 199 so we can get much more detail. All right, and then you can style it. We want our value area high, our value area low, our point of control. And then I like to make the color between the value area and the non-value area distinctly different. So you can play around with those to make it look how you want. Okay, but if we go back, you can see where 70% of the trading has taken place according to this distribution. So we fade the value area lows. If we break out of here, we go long, short or long, and we go in search of a new value area. This is all based on auction market theory and how the markets actually work. Okay? When we're in value, we tend to stay in value, right? Business is being transacted. We fade the edges of extreme. Once business has finished in that value area, price will now go in search of a new value area. So the best way to visualize it is, let's do this. If we have, and so I'll just draw here, we have price building a value area right here, right? So big businesses are getting in and out. Eventually, we're going to break out and form a new value area where business will be transacted until we form a new value area. Price is always in search of value, right? That's what we call it price discovery. Once it finds value, it's going to range, consolidate, you might call it, conduct business, and when it's finished, it will leave and go in search of a new value area where it can stop, find the buyers and sellers are in agreement, they can do business, and then when they're done, it will leave and go in search of a new value area. That's ad infinitum, in perpetuity. That is what price is always doing in the market. All right. So once you understand that, all of this comes together in a very clear way. All right. And we can put all of these together to paint a picture of what's happening in the market based on auction market theory. All right, so if I could look at all of them, I could see a distinctly clear value area that's in agreement between the VWAP, the value area high and value area low on the profile, and the initial balance, right? All three are in agreement that we're in value, raising all of these setups to fade the extremes, turning them into A+ setups. Once we leave this area, we're now in price discovery looking for the next area of value. Okay. Hopefully this video helps you guys. This is based on auction market theory, which has been around for a very long time. I've simplified all of this into my VWAP Wave system, which has 4 core setups that we trade each and every day using these 3 tools. All right. And I trade level to level, and my consistency is usually 70% plus on our winning trades, called out live in the trading room. So I encourage you to join our free Discord, download my VWAP Wave core setups guide, and start learning the 4 core setups using these tools. All right. And you'll start seeing with your back testing over and over again how price is reflecting and respecting these levels, creating high probability setups each and every day in multiple markets. All right. So join the free Discord. The link will be below. Download the free guide. Be sure to check through my other videos. And please, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Drop them in the Discord. And I look forward to trading with you sometime soon. All right. Stay safe out there. Stay sharp. Manage your risk. And I'll see you in the Discord.